it's Dave. Welcome back to my channel. So my Warmouth neck should be here tomorrow. That's going to be the Wenge neck that I got with the ebony fingerboard. That's going on my white Mexican, made in Mexico Strat that I picked up from Craigslist. So that, and I got to take it to a trophy shop. They're going to laser etch a logo in for me, and then I'll take it to Jim Casey in Stoughton to have him put it together and make sure everything's working good with it. I had another Strat. Well, I have another Strat. It's a Strat body. It had a couple of DiMarzio pickups that I wasn't sure what they were. I know it's not a Fred, and I liked the pickup, but I didn't love it, and I hated the pickguard. So I bid for this pickguard out of this company in Australia, which is like a brushed steel, and I got it, and that should be shipping here soon. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put another neck from Warmouth on it as I sell this other neck that I have. And I ended up picking up off a buddy of mine. He took this out because he put a purple Fred in his black guitar and he took his black Fred out. So I just bought this used off my buddy, the DP 153, which is the Fred F-spaced. And then I'm gonna wax pot this for him and retape it. This is a Burstbucker 2. Which is a great pickup. I don't know if you, it has on the back, if you see, it'll say patent applied for. That's because, let me see if I can get that in focus. There it is. Now, the reason why that says patent applied for is because the Burstbuckers were the actual clones of the PAFs once they figured out how they were wound. And all that, and so what happened was, I'll just tell you to you briefly. There was I believe, from what I was told by a Gibson employee way back when, was that a company went and bought a bunch of these, the original PAFs, and reverse engineered them, found out that the coils were mismatched and whatnot, and how they were wound, and there was like 3 different really variances in them, and then sold it back to Gibson, and Gibson came out with the Burstbucker, and they couldn't use the name PAF because DiMarzio had trademarked that name back in the 70s, but the Burstbucker for all intents and purposes. And it's a great pickup. If you're looking for that classic sound, I see guys going out and spending, as we've been speaking through the comments, some people go out and spend $200 and $300 for a pickup. And if you want to spend that kind of money, okay. But no, I can't hear the difference. And I think this is one of the best pickups out there, the Burstbucker. I do like the Fred a little nicer because the Fred, it's a brighter sounding pickup. Now, for those of you who are like truists into the, you don't like the Allen wrenches, you like the original look of, say, a Burstbucker, which has the flathead screws and the slugs. DiMarzio does make some nice pickups like this, but again, I don't think in their classic series they make anything as good as the Burstbucker 2 or 3. The only thing I'm going to suggest is when you buy them, make sure you take it to a tech who can wax pot them, because they do not come wax potted. The Burstbucker Pros come wax potted, but the Burstbucker Pros are not that great. Not like the 2 and 3. And the ones are okay. They're a little underwound, but if you're looking for that underwound sound, the Burstbucker 1 is a great pickup as well. So anyways, that's what I'm doing. This is going to go into my black Strat. Not the black Strat that looks like the Gilmore Strat, but a different black Strat I have. I just have too many. You know, the thing was, I have an original Aria Pro 2 neck that went to the ZZ Deluxe that I had on my very first electric guitar. It's why I kept it for nostalgic reasons, but I don't play it. It's scalloped, and it's just, I'm not crazy about it. I just don't like the neck, and therefore, I'm like, you know what, move on. It's time to move on and get rid of it. I just noticed last night that people were sending me, I had some private messages and whatnot, and I didn't even know that that could happen or what, so I feel bad because I didn't respond in a timely manner. And as the channel grows, obviously I'm not going to be able to handle the volume, but you can always reach me on my email, which should be on my page. If you need to. Otherwise, you can just comment in public. I always see those as well. And there's some interesting comments. Sometimes I have no understanding of what you're talking about. And then some people just try to be mean, which is always fun. And then some people get really involved in the conversation. And I have to go back and watch the video because I have no idea what I said that day. Because I'm filming these like as I go. But, and I basically just talk off the top of my head. And when I take it out, I edit it a little bit, different parts where I'm like, I probably shouldn't have said that. I try to get back to as many people as I can, and like I said, I'm not really too concerned about it. Some people was like, don't worry, I don't care. But I do, if somebody has a great point. And so somebody was asking me a question about modes and all that stuff, and I think all the confusion is that you're obsessed with the modes, and if you just think of a key as 7 notes, your life just becomes easier. If you're playing a G dominant chord and you're soloing, and you're playing G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, no sharps and no flats, you're in the key of C. If you say, but I'm in G mixolydian. Okay, your starting note's G, I get it. You're playing in the key of C, you're centering on G. Because then some other guy's going to sit there and say, no, I think he's playing an F Lydian. Like, it's all the same key. Who cares what you want to call it? You're just making it like a big thing. You're just opening the door for error. And when you're communicating in music, you just want to be the most simple, concise way to speak to people. A lot of people talk with their ego. They want to sit there and show that they know things. And when you're in a studio situation where the money is coming out of your own pocket, or it's a budget that you have and you have to match that budget and you have to think about these things, at that point, all you want to do is communicate whatever you can say in the shortest amount of time to get that guy to play exactly what you're thinking. And so that's what you kind of have to do. And you could sit there and say, and try to be like, but this is in, we're in the Lydian dominant mode here. People are just going to look at you and go, what? Just tell me what you want me. It's like, for you to think about that, instead of just saying it's in a melodic minor and then telling them the key of what melodic minor it is, it becomes just easy, because it's music is so much more about communicating and getting the thing across. I mean, sometimes people don't even need the chart. They can hear the song and be like, okay, well, I'll play, depending on what they want you to play. And, I want to say, when I was doing a lot of session work, a lot of the session work is not glamorous. It is not like you're in and you get to play your balls off and do what you like to do and be creative. Most of it is not that. Most of it is you go in and you play something extremely simple, but you play it well. But it's really simple and it's really going to work on your timing, And I would recommend that if you, just to do as much as you can, if you're doing home recording, do that. Listen to those tracks. Listen to what you're doing. I mean, today now, when you're doing home recording, you can play like crap and then go into a program like Melodyne and move things around and change pitch. And you can do all kinds of stuff in Melodyne. You can also do it just using Pro Tools itself if you need to nudge stuff. So there's so many ways you can fix things. The thing is to practice and do what you can do. But for the most part, you're playing, other people's, what they want to do, and you have to learn how to take direction and all that. Of course, producing is a lot funner because you have the control and you know what you hear in your head. Then it's the question of communicating. And this isn't just for session guys or to do session. This is in your band situation and everything else. It's why, I think it's important that not just drummers know how to subdivide time, but the bass player, the guitar player, the keyboard, everybody's on the same page. So that when somebody says there's a push on downbeat of 1, everybody understands what a push is. For those who don't, a push is an anticipation that comes an 8th note earlier. So you would play on 4 and of the bar earlier, as opposed to playing on the downbeat of 1. But those are the things that I think just will make you a better player. Also, on another note, there was a guy who commented about, people's lists and favorites and everything else, and he didn't like Sergeant Pepper. And he's a big Fix fan. I saw the Fix live in 1990. I was still in Boston at the time, and they were fantastic. Years later, I got to meet the band when I was running West LA Music. They would come in, and we even talked about that show on Lansdowne Street. A great band, underrated. I think that band had just even songs like Secret Separation and Stand or Fall is great. But, going to the Beatles, you were talking about how people always talk about Sgt. Pepper. And if you want my opinion, it's one of the albums that I passed by. There's a few good songs on it, but I think Rubber Soul and Revolver, to me, are like the greatest Beatles albums there are. I can listen to them nonstop. Every song's great, and I never get sick of it. But, the thing about lists is it's like a popularity contest, and it's just like the way people look at, like, Eric Clapton. And, Clapton, again, I'm going to bring this up. I'm not a fan of him as a guitar player, but as an artist, I like him. I think the album August is fantastic. I thought Journeyman was very good, and I think he had some songs in the 70s and early 80s that were excellent. That being said, I look at him the same way I look at Elton John. I think Elton John is a great entertainer, singer, songwriter, performer as well. Now, would I put Elton John up with the greatest pianists in the world? Not even close. Would I put Billy Joel up there? I think these two guys would basically tell you they're not the greatest players in the world. They understand. They play to their strengths. And that is something that's extremely important, and I can't stress that enough. I used to play in a band, and my argument with the band was I was more like the hired guy in the band. I was probably like the fourth or fifth guitar player to step in the spot. And it was a temporary gig, no one going in. But the thing was, I always said, you guys do not play to your strengths. You just play to your weaknesses. And it's something that you, as a band, people don't know that you're doing it, but they just know something isn't good. You should be playing to what you're strong at and what your strong suit is. And like Clapton and Elton John and all these guys. So, it's like when you see them on like the list of top 10 greatest guitar players, and you see a guy like Santana and Clapton in there, they're in there because it's a popularity contest. In fact, I don't think any of the players that I've seen in any top 10 are probably as good as Brent Mason, the country guitar player that plays on every album. Look up Brent Mason. The guy's an effing monster. Or Guthrie Govan. Any of these guys are monsters.
My, I'll bet you monsters lead interesting lives. I said to my girlfriend just the other day, gee, I'll bet monsters are interesting, I said. The places you must go and the things you must see, my stars.
Well, guys like Holdsworth, around the session guys that I knew in LA, everybody, when they talked about guitar players, they would have to take Holdsworth out of the conversation because he's the greatest player. Whatever criteria, of course, there's always a criteria, but when you see these lists, I always feel like it's like just a popularity contest. I like Jimi Hendrix, and people who talk about Hendrix are always like, he's the greatest, no one's better than Hendrix, I think Hendrix was great. I don't care for his voice, so as an artist, I don't really like him. As a guitar player, I like him. The problem for me is I care more about the artist than I do the player. But as a player, is he my favorite? No. I think guys that took from him took it to more interesting spaces. Now, I understand that you're going to say, yeah, but Hendrix did it first. Well, great. In that case, so every time you mention a shredder guitar player, should I bring up Paganini on the violin who inspired a lot of this harmonic minor nonsense? No, because it's irrelevant. Yes, he was first. Yes, he was the guy that did it. Yes, and all that, but it has no bearing on what you connect to. So, like, to me, if I want to hear Hendrix, like, there's a part of Hendrix, the later Hendrix, that I get more out of Robin Trower, Bridge of Sighs. And it's like, because I like that artist better. And not the artist of Robin Trower, the artist of the band with James Dewar singing. That whole mix is like perfect for me. When I think about the spacey type of and blues-based, spacey type of playing, I think Uli Roth was a much better guitar player, and he connected more with me. I think, for more of the rocker guy, a lot of people would tell you that Richie Blackmore did more for them than Hendrix did at that time. I would not say that, but I know some people that do. And I'm not arguing or saying one is right or one is wrong. We're always talking here about opinions. But the point I'm making is you look at these lists, and these lists are, it's popularity, it's favorites, and it's like, because there's no criteria. When you sit there and you see, now I love Angus Young, but you're going to sit there and tell me Angus Young's a great, one of the top 5 greatest guitar players, and Holdsworth's in the 30s? I mean, this is like what Rolling Stone does. It's like, you got to be out of your mind. At that point, the criteria is, it's basically an audience poll, and it's a popularity contest. So when I hear people talk about like the Beatles, and they say, oh, the greatest Beatles album, oh, you got to hear Sgt. Pepper, it's so good. Yeah, it's not. It's all right. There's some good songs. The opening song, Sgt. Pepper's, not one of my favorites. And it goes into A Little Help with My Friends, not one of my favorites. I do like Wednesday morning at 5 o'clock. I do like some of the material, some of it. But do I compare it to Revolver? I can put Rubber Soul and Revolver on my on CD, on a mix, and listen to them for days on end. Just like the fact that, it's funny, the other day I put ELO, Out of the Blue, back in my CD player in my car. And I'm like, man, I go back in the songs. Every time, like, if I take it out for a while and go back to it, it's just great. I can listen to that album over and over again. The thing is don't get your panties all jumbled up because somebody doesn't like the same player you like. I made a comment about my drum videos, my favorite drummers, and I'm not a big Neil Peart fan. I think Neil Peart was excellent for Rush. I think he was great for the band Rush. He's not my kind of drummer. I just don't think he has a groove. I don't think he's... it doesn't feel right to me. It doesn't sound that great to me. I love it. Again, in the context of Rush, I love it. When I saw him live, it really put me off, just because I was like, this guy, it's not a loose feel. Like when I think of like drummers like Jeff Porcaro, Vinnie Colaiuta, Dave Weckl, and not to say all the jazz guys, but Terry Bozzio, Chad Wackerman, Brooks Wackerman. I mean, there's so many great drummers out there that really... I mean, even John Bonham. I mean, you listen to John Bonham play on a groove like Achilles' Last Stand, and it's like, come on. I mean, it's just a groove, and again, but people are like, if I hear one more person tell me Neil Peart's the greatest drummer in the world, I'm like, I'm gonna go bananas, because I'm like, what world do you live in? He probably doesn't make my top 10 or 20, but I like him. He's good. I mean, my criteria is just different than what other people want to hear, like all the drummings on the subdivisions in a real stiff time, and sometimes he'll go to 7/8. Big deal. I don't care. I think Joey Jordison from Slipknot was amazing, and I think Danny Carey from Tool, awesome. I mean, these guys, I think I think, again, it's just like a popularity contest. And, like I said, I'm not saying I don't think Neil's a good player. He's just not for me. If you listen to a groove by Sting called 7 Days, where Vinnie Colaiuta's playing in 5/4, and he's got that hat going, and it sounds like it is the most easy listening 5/4 you're ever going to hear. And it doesn't even come off as 5/4 until, unless you start counting it. To me, that's special. Like, that's great. But anyways, I just don't want to go on and on about this, but it's just giant popularity contests. And it's funny, because I make a comment about certain players and people are like, oh, thank God you finally called this guy out. It's like, I'm not really trying to call anybody out. I'm just saying it doesn't do anything for me, and I just don't care. I've seen and know a bunch of guitar players in Los Angeles that I think are like better than 99% of the people out in the field. And they don't get any recognition. And there's a ton of session guys out there that are absolute smoking players. I mean, I can bring up Dan Huff. I think Dan Huff is an absolute monster guitar player. Now, for those who don't know who Dan Huff is the guy who produces a lot of country, Carrie Underwood, and just a lot of country stuff these days. He also produced Cryptic Writings for Megadeth, and he also had a band called Giant in the early 90s, and the guy's a monster. Great musician, great player, very unsung. Oh, he also played the guitar solo in Danger Zone for Kenny Loggins. The guy's a monster. Look up Dan Huff. Brent Mason. There's a lot of players out there. One of my all-time favorites, Steve Wariner. There is a lot of players out there that are just smoking. And, I would say dig. Stop, look for these guys, because this will obviously help your playing when you're pulling out licks and people are like, what the hell's that? And you're like, yeah. Years ago, I had to do a session. It was for a children's project. And I co-wrote the song with the piano player. And when it came time, when he started playing his piano part, I instantly heard the guitar part in my head and I started playing it. And everyone loved it and was like, oh, this. And all I was doing in my mind was imitating Steve Bartek from Oingo Boingo. That's all I was doing. And, I'm sure if Steve heard it, he'd be like, that don't sound like me. It's almost like, a lot of people think they're channeling different players and whatnot. But you really, no matter what, you always still sound like yourself. But that's a great thing to have, is to have all these different players where you can draw upon and be like, okay, here I'm doing Steve Bartek. In this section here, I'm doing, Johnny Marr. Whatever it is, it's the more you can bring to the table, the more you'll have to eat. Anyways, I gotta go eat something. I am starving. I feel like Sweetums in The Frog Prince.
It's yummy, yummy time. Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Very good.
How's that for a topper?
You're right on target.
You're right on the money. Everything you said.
You hit the nail right on the head with your comments, what you're saying today.
You're 150% correct.